3 tankers, 1 corridor, 0 hesitation. The moment those ships appeared on American radar screens, every alarm on every warship lit up at once. Dozens of sailors moved to battle stations simultaneously. Fighters were already airborne before the tankers got within 5 miles of the line. What happened next lasted less than 20 minutes, and when it was over, a message had been sent, not just to the crews of those ships, not just to Tehran, not just to Washington, but to every government on the planet that had been watching this situation and wondering the same question. Is the United States actually serious this time?
Now, Beijing had a decision to make, and the decision it made tells you everything about the real balance of power in the world right now. China imports over 10 million barrels of oil every single day. Nearly half of that supply, not just from Iran, but from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, transits the Strait of Hormuz. As long as the U.S. Navy controls that waterway, China's energy security is directly, immediately, and completely dependent on American decisions. That is not a comfortable position for a country that has spent 20 years telling its own people it is becoming a global superpower. So, China tested the blockade. A tanker named Rich Star adjusted its course 20 minutes from the enforcement corridor. No radio contact, no request for permission. It increased speed and drove straight toward the American line as if the blockade simply did not exist. On the bridge of the nearest American warship, every screen lit up simultaneously. What followed was fast, precise, and completely without hesitation. Within minutes, American naval vessels had moved to intercept positions. Aircraft overhead had adjusted. The entire enforcement apparatus built around 3 carrier strike groups, 15 warships, F-35s flying combat air patrols, submarines below the surface, and over 50,000 U.S. military personnel in the theater responded as a single coordinated machine. Rich Star executed a U-turn. Then a second tanker, Artura, approached the same corridor. Same result. Then a third. 3 Chinese-linked tankers, 3 approaches, 3 U-turns. No shots fired, no confrontation, no standoff. Just the unmistakable, undeniable reality of a line that was not going to move. Now here is where the story gets interesting. Because what happened next, what China did after those tankers turned back, is the moment that actually defines this entire crisis. Chinese Defense Minister Admiral Dong Jun stepped in front of cameras and delivered a statement. He said Chinese vessels had the right to pass through Hormuz. He said China had agreements with Iran. He said the United States should not interfere in Chinese affairs. Strong words, commanding words, words broadcast across every state media channel in China and circulated through diplomatic cables worldwide. And not one ship was protected by those words. Not one tanker moved through that corridor after the statement was made. Not one escort was dispatched. Not one Chinese warship approached the enforcement line. The gap between what was said and what was done was visible to every intelligence service, every navy, and every government watching this unfold in real time. And that gap is the real story. See, China has options. It has a naval base in Djibouti. It has a navy that has expanded dramatically over the past decade. It has Coast Guard tactics it has used successfully in the South China Sea for years. Gray zone maneuvers, civilian escorts, deniable pressure. But those tactics work against Philippine patrol boats. They do not work against 3 American carrier strike groups operating at full combat readiness in a single theater. A direct military confrontation at Hormuz means 2 nuclear powers shooting at each other at sea. The last time something this close to that scenario played out was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. 13 days, the entire world held its breath. Beijing looked at that calculation and chose patience over confrontation. And that choice,
That deliberate, visible, unmistakable choice to hold back exposed something that years of diplomatic statements and military parades and infrastructure investments had carefully concealed. There is still a gap between what China says it can do and what China will actually do when the line is drawn in a place it cannot contest. So where does this end? Three paths exist right now. Iran returns to the negotiating table. The pressure of a $13 billion monthly revenue loss, stranded oil storage, and an economy already close to collapse forces a deal. The blockade ends. A framework is signed. This is the outcome Washington engineered every piece of this operation to produce. Or the crisis expands. Proxy forces activate. A second waterway gets disrupted. A Chinese convoy pushes the blockade and creates a confrontation neither side fully controls. Oil passes $150. The global economy fractures. Or it grinds. No resolution, no escalation, just mounting pressure, probing tankers, selective enforcement, and a slow restructuring of global energy trade around alternatives that take years to build and leave permanent damage behind. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended because someone in Moscow looked at the American blockade line, looked at what was behind it, and made a rational calculation that the cost of crossing exceeded anything that could be gained. In the Strait of Hormuz in 2026, the same equation is playing out. 3 tankers tested the line. 3 tankers turned back. A defense minister spoke powerful words that protected nothing. And the world is now watching a clock count down toward a moment of decision that cannot be delayed indefinitely. Hormuz used to be Iran's weapon. Now it is Iran's cage. And the key to that cage is sitting in a room in Washington, waiting to see if Tehran and Beijing can afford to keep paying the price of staying locked inside. That is what a tanker making a U-turn actually means. And now, you know the whole story.